Hey, welcome to the Cam and Otis Show. This episode, I'm sorry, sidebar. I got to say episode instead of week because we're changing our sequencing up a little bit. So that's why I had that weird pause, and I'm doing this weird sidebar. So now I'm back. This episode we have Elton Johnson, Army vet, and a leader extraordinaire. And the reason I'm saying a leader extraordinaire is because we were just talking about in the green room the burden of leadership when you have people in your team that need help and you can't do it. And whenever you're listening to this show, just know that the time frame we're recording it, well, actually the day we're recording it is 20 August. So Kabul, Afghanistan fell under Taliban control on the previous Sunday, whatever math date that is, 15th, I think it is, on the 15th of August. And we're dealing with all kinds of craziness going on that none of us have ever experienced in our lifetime, and even I would say even a generation before us in that evacuation. With this long drawn out thing, Elton, I really appreciate you carving out some time to spend with us. I know it's been a rough week, and I'd love to get into some of what's going on and what you're dealing with your team. So appreciate you taking some time, man. Great to have you here.
Thanks, Ellis. You bet. Anytime.
Yeah. So, we were just talking about it. You've got some team, some guys on your team, linguists that used to work with the commandos and the special forces. And for those of you who don't know, the commandos, special forces, we're referring to the Afghan National Army commandos and special forces. And they're still in Kabul and their life is in danger. Is that correct?
Right, exactly. Just a little bit of background. There's been a lot of criticism about the Afghan National Army, and a lot of it is justified, but the elite element of the Afghan National Army were the commandos, which we stood up about 6 battalions when I was there in 2011, the battalion being about 600 guys each. And then we started to a special forces element within the Afghan National Army. Now, for us to train these guys, naturally we had to hire interpreters. So we had a pool of interpreters, and they were working with us in regards to training and equipping the commandos and the special forces guys. Because of the reputation and the fighting ability of the commandos and special forces, naturally the Taliban are going after those guys. And the interpreters who work with us in regards to the training the commandos and the special forces guys. So they're the top of the kill list. So it's imperative that we get these guys out. And that's what I've been working on for the past week, because a lot of them are still stuck in Afghanistan. Or if they're here in the United States, and some of them are, they're trying to get their families out, because, the Taliban will go after their family members as well.
Yeah. And just a little background. So the commandos were the larger element, and then we created special forces, which were much more similar to what we did. And I'll just tell you, the audience, that these guys are freaking amazing. These were truly, and well, that organization, I should say, the men that were part of it are still elite and great soldiers. So you can't lump them into this generalization that's going on about the Afghan Army. These guys, their performance was top notch. We trained them. We were fought side by side with them, and then in a true sense of foreign internal defense. Sorry, going back just a little bit of my deep background. We let these guys start to operate, and all we did was advise and assist and provide air support, and they were phenomenal as an organization, each and every one of them. So I got to put that caveat out there that you can't just, as with anything really in life, the generalization stuff. Anytime you generalize any groups of people, there's always people who don't fit into that generalization, and we got to make sure you're aware of that. So Elton, what do you do as a leader when you're in this situation? I mean, we talk a lot about business on the show, but I think there's some great leadership lessons that you can share with us, because this has been a rough week for you. How do you as a leader deal with this?
Before I comment on that, I just want to say, yeah, to put in proper perspective, yeah, the commandos are similar to our Army Rangers, and of course, Afghan Special Forces similar to our Special Forces, but they were training up to that level. I don't think they were at that level yet, and it takes a long time to get up to the level that our Special Forces soldiers are at currently. But yeah, they were the elite of the Afghan National Army, and the situation is, once you're in a leadership position. And I was basically the acting commanding officer of the Special Operation Advisory Group I was assigned to for about 2 weeks. So I was in a leadership role. And once you're in that leadership role, the thing that we're taught, which is leave no person behind, that gets ingrained in you. So when you're in a situation like this, where people that work for you, even though this was like 9 years ago, I mean, you still feel an obligation to them. I mean, you got to take care of your troops. That's one of the first things they teach you in OCS. Mission first, and right after mission, you take care of your people. So that doesn't end when you're no longer in the country, or you're back in civilian life. I mean, you still have that obligation. So that's what I'm dealing with right now, doing the best I can to fulfill my role as a leader.
Yeah, well, and so one of the things that I'm curious about, and this is some deep thought provoking situation, is when you are in that leadership role like you are, and not in a direct, right? I mean, these guys aren't under your command, if you will, but you have that personal tie back to them. How do you deal with the fact that there is next to nothing that you as a leader can do to help these team members?
It's very frustrating. It's very frustrating. So right now I'm dealing with the problem of getting them out of Afghanistan, and the flights are available there at Hamid Karzai International Airport, but getting through those checkpoints is the problem. I'm in touch with all these guys via email. Thank God it's not like it was back in 2001, where you just had fax machines and satellite phones. Now you got iPhones, you have the internet, so it's easy to stay in touch with these guys. But the situation is one person can only do so much. I'm in touch with my congressman. He's helping out. I've been in touch with Senator Cotton's office. He's volunteered to step up and see what he can do. And I'm trying to get in touch with people at the State Department, because the State Department is the key element in this. They can issue the documents that they can get the people access into Kia. But then the only thing they have to deal with is getting through the checkpoints. From what I understand from the communications I'm getting from my guys in Kabul, it's tough getting through the checkpoints because of the Taliban and the crowds. People just want to get out of Kabul, and they're jamming up the checkpoints. So the people that work for the U.S. and the interpreters, former interpreters, just can't get out because of the crowds.
Yeah, it's a dire situation, and and by the way, you touched on one of my favorite phrases. I use this in probably about 60 or 70% of the talks I do on leadership, is mission first, people always. That is just such a critical thing. And when it's instilled in you, over your career and even in the business, you still carry that forward. When something like this happens, it's so difficult. It that weighs on you. And by the way, great job. I'll just applaud you right now. Great job trying to get into some other resources from this end to help on that end. There's so many things that are rolling through my head, and different things that are well outside. And I'm laughing at myself because with the background we have, it's like, oh well, what about this, and I know the fellas are doing that. So, but we gotta, we always want to do more and do what we can to help. So, what I'd like to know is, in these folks that you've contacted, and I'm going to come back around to the how else can we help sort of thing, but in the folks that you've contacted, how did you determine that was the route? You know what I mean? Because this is outside of, I'm guessing, just, I don't want to make an assumption here, this is outside of anything that you've ever experienced. I know it's outside of anything I've ever experienced. So how did you just kind of start taking action, for lack of a better way of putting it?
Well, I just never got out of my job function when I was in Afghanistan. When I came back to the States in 2011, I should mention that, you know, I was part of the drawdown in 2011. President Obama pulled all the troops out of Iraq, as you know, at the end of 2011, but he also pulled 10,000 guys out of Afghanistan. And I was one of the 10,000. I was on a year tour, and I was 10 months into it. And there was a lot of important work that I still wanted to do, but unfortunately, I wasn't able to do it. But when I came back, I tried to begin work on getting some of the interpreters out of Afghanistan, because they knew their lives were in danger, and they figured, you know, their best chance for survival was to eventually come to the United States. So working with my congressman, Mark Takano, we got 6 of them out between the time I got back from Afghanistan up until last year. But because we got the 6 out, when this thing hit, the former interpreters who were still stuck in Afghanistan, they started contacting me, asking me for help. Of course, you know, the timeline we're working under now, it's really, really critical, and it's really, really short. It typically takes 3 years for the U.S. Embassy to issue a special immigrant visa for an interpreter to come to the United States with his family, which is kind of ironic because, you know, a person could just cross the border and they're into the United States. They're at the front of the line. And these guys who work for us put their lives on the line. They got to wait 3 years. And the situation is compounded because, as you know, now the embassy is closed. From what I understand, they've transferred their job functions over to the airport. And I read last night that there's only 20 of these guys working on the paperwork to get these interpreters out. 20 embassy officials, State Department officials, and they're going to increase it. This is the good news they put out, if you want to call it good news. They're going to double the force to 40. But I mean, you got thousands of Afghans who were not only interpreters, but, you know, work for the U.S. military, the U.S. government. And then they all need to get out because you never know. I do know that the Afghan Taliban have kill lists. All the commandos, all the people, all the Afghans who serve with the commandos are on the kill list. All the Afghans who serve with special forces, Afghan special forces, are on the kill list. The interpreters who work for these elite units, they're on the kill list. I'm on the kill list because, you know, I was, like I said, working with the Special Operations Advisory Group. Any American or a NATO person who work with the commandos or special forces, they're on the kill list. So it's imperative that, you know, the people that are still stuck in Afghanistan, whether they're Americans or Afghans, and, you know, they were in these special type of jobs, or they had these special type of skills, they need to get out.
Yeah, and just so everybody understands that, if you've never, I mean, because yeah, I remember those days too. The kill list is not just, hey, kill the guy. It's kill the guy and get a reward. You know, I mean, it is, you know, there's a difference, and in that sense, this is next level stuff. This isn't, you know, this is you know, what my mind's jumping to, and maybe it's because I was reading an article about, you know, referring to Afghanistan as the Wild West, and, you know, in that sort of sense of how we were trying to develop some things. But, you know, there's a lot of truth to what the Taliban have been doing for years, is they would identify key individuals, and in this case, the entire organization. And that's why anytime you see a picture of these guys, these units, they were always, I mean, it's hot as hell in Afghanistan in the summertime. I mean, but they are completely covered up to try and protect their identity, because as soon as they're known, they're put on a kill list, and guess what? Their family too. I mean, it's, this isn't normal sort of stuff, you know, movies, and this is bad. These are bad people that want to do terrible things to somebody. They'll tell you on TV, they'll tell you on the news, they'll say what will get complacency, I believe, from world leaders. But the people that are doing it, whether or not they're doing it on their own or at the command, they're still going to do it. The people on the ground, the tactics are still happening, and that's not going to change no matter what the person that's sitting in the office or doing the quote unquote negotiations is saying. It doesn't work that way. It hadn't since we've rolled in there, you know, and in what was October 2001. It is, these are bad people that their values of life are completely different than ours. Just understand that. And I could explain that more, but I don't want to get too much up on my soapbox, because yeah, this is not an easy thing. And what I'd love to know, Elton, and I'll just jump into this now. We'll come back around to it, is for anybody listening, any Americans or wherever you are listening, how can they support, help out with this? Do you have resources that folks can do, or whatever?
Things are still forming. I mean, there's organizations that are now putting out information that they're posting information in regards to what they're doing to help the situation over there in Afghanistan. I've been trying to sort out the legitimate ones, and I'm hoping that we get more action from the Biden administration. I think, and you can weigh in on this, Otis, I think they don't have enough truth, to tell you the truth. It's my understanding that they started with 3,000, now it's up to 5,000. I would think, being a military man, I would think they need to double that, put about 10,000 boots on the ground in regards to if things really get ugly. And getting back to what you said earlier about these kill lists, you were absolutely right. When I was in Afghanistan, there's a well-known fact that Special Forces, U.S. Army Special Forces, the Green Berets, there was $1,000 bounty on each one of those guys. They wanted to kill anybody who was assisting with forming the commandos and Special Forces, and of course they were after the Afghan commandos and Special Forces. So yeah, it was a real nasty situation. Most people aren't aware of that, but. Getting back to closing this out, yeah, I think once there's more publicity in regards to the situation in Afghanistan, because I don't think it's being covered, that situation at the airport. I mean, the flights are there. They're claiming that they'll be able to fly out 9,000 people a day. And this is going to be up till the 31st, which is only 11 days away. But if you can't get into the airport, you can't get on these flights. So they're going to be flying, maybe 20, 30 people are aboard a C-17, and you got thousands of people outside the gate. So what they need to do is find a way to clear up this situation at the checkpoints that will allow the people that need to be evacuated to get in and get out.
Yeah, it is. I agree with you. The Force Pro can, the number of organizations, number of boots on the ground could easily double, and that would maybe make it to where that personnel flow from outside the airport can get into the airport. Because you're right, having driven around there a few times, those checkpoints, if you're not manning routes, and I'm gonna guess, because I'm an eternal optimist. I'm going to guess our commander on the ground is going to start pushing the fellows out to create safe routes into the airport. But what happens is, as soon as you push that, let's just say that Taliban checkpoint that's maybe a kilometer away from the airport, as soon as you push that away, well, he may move off of that main road and move onto a feeder road, or he may move 500 meters down the road. It is those things. This is a very dynamic environment that if you're not willing to be dynamic in it to counter it, you're going to struggle, and you're always going to be playing catch up. And right now we're in catch up mode. Exactly.
In the situation in this case, I mean, time is critical. The Taliban, they've only been in Kabul for less than a week. So I would imagine that they still haven't consolidated, and they still haven't gotten very well organized. So the time to really move on these guys is now. Each day, they'll probably bring in more and more troops, and they'll get to more and more structure in regards to how they're controlling Kabul. So they'll be very difficult for people to get to the airport. And as you heard from President Biden, Americans they're stuck in the country and now tasked with getting to the airport on their own. I mean, they can't rely on any help from the federal government, which was amazing. I never thought in my lifetime I would see that where we're, Americans were left on their own by our government. I mean, I don't want to get political in regards to this, but I've just never seen anything like this before.
No.
As when we have these conversations, I like to try to bring a little bit more of the civilian perspective into this. And so I'm really curious because the one thing I've been seeing a lot, whether it's, from civilians, politicians, whatever, it's a lot of Monday morning quarterbacking on something that they all seem to want. It seemed like the political consensus was that we should be moving along from Afghanistan, but with a good plan. And it seemed like there was always that rhetoric around wanting to move out and getting troops out. Like it was this big talking point. And then as soon as it's happened, they've all immediately started playing the Monday morning quarterback of, oh, you didn't do it the right way. And so I would think it would be great if you two could just provide a little bit of perspective onto, what went wrong leading up to it over the last, 2 to 3 years that from what I've seen, that's been kind of compiling to this point. And then what are some more actionable steps moving forward? Because to the point of the, the talking point of for the last 20 years of, or really, I guess more so 15 years of needing to get out of there. I don't think that the American people are exactly like, okay, well, now we need to go all the way back in to go save this, but we can still look at this situation and say that is messed up and we need to do something about it. So can you guys give us a little bit of perspective on the last few years? And then also, where's that happy medium moving forward?
I'll let you go first.
Yeah. Oh, did you say you wanted me to go first? Because I'll start.
Come on, Colonel.
Well, you're the host, so I'll let you go.
Yeah. Well, here's the thing, and I've seen this not just in Afghanistan, but in several other countries I've done some stuff in over the years, is we roll in, the US, with this grandiose vision that nation should look like us. That culture should have the same values as us. And we roll in and we attempt to do it, but in a sense of get it done quickly, because the military has the staying power, no doubt. The military will perform the mission above and beyond the mission. But the political, and I don't mean the elected officials, but the political backing of the population gets tired of it. Because they get tired, they see the price tag, they see the lives lost, they see these things happening, and the population, the US population goes, well, why are we there? Why are we doing this? Why? And they lose interest. It no longer is an important thing. So the population says, hey, stop doing that, whatever mission, whether it was Iraq, Afghanistan, Haiti, Iraq again, Vietnam, the population pulls back and says, get out and get done. What happened was, in this case, I don't disagree. I mean, Elton, I'm sure you're there with me. 10 years ago, we could have done this. We probably should have done this. But what we didn't do is, whether it was naivety, which, gosh, I hate that as an excuse, because it should never be an excuse for anybody in a leadership position. But that naivety of, we'll just pull all the security out and everything will flow okay, because that is, oh my goodness, that is it, no matter what the situation is. In this case, with this organization, the Taliban, we know what they're like. We've been studying them for 30, 40 years, right? We were side by side with them when they kicked the Russians out. And then we went in 2001 and kicked them out because they were harboring Osama bin Laden. So we know how these people think. We know what their values are, but yet we still tend to try to put our values on them and look at their decision processes based on what our values would be if we were them, which is just terribly wrong. So, I'm kind of babbling in that sense of in order to have fixed this, it would have been 100 years, because this is not a generation. This is not a single generation fix. This is a multi-generation, probably third or fourth generation education to develop a different attitude of their culture. I mean, quite frankly, I mean, their culture is so different from ours. And Elton, I know you know that, and I mean, they're beautiful people. There's nothing wrong with people having a different culture, but when you try to put your measures and your values on them, that's the mistake. Fundamentally, when you do it that way. Elton, I'll turn that over to you.
Exactly. Well, one thing I've discovered is that it's our take on war is very different from their take on war. To Americans, we don't like long wars. I mean, we consider World War II, which lasted 4 years, a long war. So for us to be in Afghanistan for 20 years, naturally the Americans were tired. They wanted to get out. These guys, if you look at the history, I mean, they've been at war since 1979 when the Soviets invaded. There was 10 years of the fighting the Soviets. Then they had their civil war, and then we came in. And what's incredible about this is that we beat them totally in 2001, but they were able to hunker down in Pakistan, wait 20 years and come back. I mean, that's just incredible. And I've had this discussion with some of my Army buddies. All they basically know is war. That's what they're used to. So we were completely mismatched in regards to that. So based upon the fact that we just aren't cut out for nation building, which is obvious, and Americans just can't tolerate a long war. We should have been making plans for our drawdown a long time ago. And what I'm amazed at, and I don't have the complete picture. I'm no longer in the system. I'm in the retired reserves, but I'm no longer in the reserve system or active duty. So, I don't have access to classified information because I don't have my security clearance, but I'm just interested in finding out what the drawdown plans were, because, from what I'm hearing with all the TV commentators, and I agree 100% with them, if we had drawdown plans, we should have been making plans to get our people out, the civilian out first. And then, our equipment, some type of plan to get our equipment out, the equipment that we weren't leaving behind. And lastly, then we close down things properly. But from what I see, none of that stuff was done properly. And that's why we're in the mess that we are today.
So there were two different things that I've read in a few different articles, starting back a week ago and then seeing them in other ones since then. And like you said, this is kind of a generalization towards the Afghan military. And obviously there's, lots of different situations inside of this larger picture that, are more specific with that. But the two things that stood out for me when I was reading that was the first of which, that a lot of the training, not necessarily of the individuals, but of the larger picture for their military, was set up as a complement to the US forces there, and that it wasn't really set up to function on its own. And the stat that I've used in my conversations about this to illustrate that so I think it was about 210 military bases that the Afghans were running inside of Afghanistan. And I think it was that over 100 of those could only be resupplied by air. And that was all being done by the United States until, 2 months ago or so. And so that these infrastructures that we had built weren't really set up to last after we had left. Is that similar to what you guys have heard or read? Is that off at all?
No, that's spot on. But what's missing from that is a couple of things. One, the geography of Afghanistan. If you think the mountains, our Rocky Mountains, are rough and rugged, I would at least 3x, if not 5x, those mountains, and the steepness and the remoteness of those mountains in Afghanistan. So there are plenty of places where the only way that you can get there is a goat trail, and there is a village in there, and it's a self-sustaining village. So when you put a military base there, the only way it can be resupplied is through air. The second piece of that is we have been training Afghan pilots. There is an Afghan Air Force. So that has been going on, and think about the complexity of flying an airplane. And we're taking, I'm gonna steal it just a little bit and a little bit more of an Otis soapbox here, because the other thing that's happened, and this happened in Iraq also, is the intellectuals left or were killed flat out. I have a friend of mine who his father was a colonel in the Air Force when the Soviets invaded, and he was executed on the airfield in Kabul. You know, I mean, that's what happens. And then fortunately, him and his mother were able to smuggle themselves out, walk from Kabul to Pakistan and get across the border. And that's how they got to the US. But this is what we fail to understand. And a lot of people brush over this, is the intellectuals. And I'm not saying people aren't smart, but I'm talking about we're taking people from that isolated village that I just talked about, and we're creating a government and a military and a police force from people who have known nothing but their tribe for generations. There is no national understanding in Afghanistan when you think about going back to the culture. And then you take out the intellectuals, whether through execution or refugee status, then you're starting from ground zero. I mean, really, truly ground zero.
It's like it's an interesting example of, you know, of a brain drain type thing that you see with countries where, you know, like the normal immigration patterns from, like, I know India is a place that has a lot of problems with this, to where the smartest people in India get on these, and I don't know the name of the specific program, where they come to the US to go to school here and become doctors and all that kind of stuff. And so you're taking off that top piece, and then they wind up over here. And I think that's a really interesting thing, because I've had the same kind of conversation around the immigration patterns in South America, to where, you know, you're talking about wanting to build up a country and build up communities and all this kind of stuff. But then you also have this issue to where the people who are smart enough, intellectual enough, compassionate enough, all those kind of things to help build everything up are also the same type of people who are smart enough, care about their family enough to leave. And it creates this really, really interesting situation there. Is that something that is, I don't know, I guess I'm trying to build up to, how do you move past that type of an issue, kind of in a broad spectrum, not necessarily Afghanistan particularly?
Well, I'll say this, I agree with you 100%, Cam. You know, I'll give you an example. One of the Afghan interpreters I got out, the six that I mentioned that we brought over between, 2011 up to, 2019. One of them is incredible. He moved to Texas and started a trucking company. And now he employs something like 30 or 40 people. He's doing well in regards to his business. And you know, when he came over here, he could barely speak any English. So we are getting the cream of the crop. And of course, that's going to create a brain drain on Afghanistan. But, you know, unless the Taliban has a different way of ruling, they claim that they're new Taliban. I mean, that's going to continue. So that's going to hurt the country. In regards to the Army, I agree 100% with Otis. You know, what our problem is that when we go into a country, man, we haven't been in many, but, you know, we did this in Vietnam. Of course, I'm not a Vietnam vet, so I can't really speak a lot about it, but I saw what was going on in Afghanistan. We tried to form their army based upon our army. And it didn't work because Otis is right. They were into tribes. So we saw that when the Taliban came in, they made deals with the warlords, with the tribal chiefs and whatever, and they negotiated surrenders of these provinces. And that's why the Afghan army folded so quickly. If it would have been the national army, like the American army, I mean, they would have fought tooth and nail. I mean, it wouldn't be like it is right now. So, you know, if we do this in the future, and I hope we don't, we have to really think about the culture and the way the country's set up, because if we don't do that, then it's just going to be a waste of time and resources. And worst of all, it'll be a waste of lives. And American lives is something that we shouldn't be wasting on a conflict that we don't intend to win, or we have no solid game plan or strategy as to how to win it, which I think is what happened in Afghanistan.
Yeah, that's, I think it's the acceptance. And you know, I remember when I was doing some planning stuff in probably 5 or 6 and laying some things out, you know, this, I already knew at that point we needed 50 plus years. And I'm also, you know, although I just said earlier, I'm the eternal optimist. I'm a bit of I'm a realist optimist, if that's a thing.
Come on, we've talked about it. It's unwavering confidence in finding the solution,
There you go.
not confidence in how fast it'll be.
There you go. Leave it to my son to analyze me. Man, that's kind of scary. But in that sense of this ain't fixing, it doesn't fix in 10 years. It doesn't fix in 20 years. And it probably don't fix in 50 years if we had stayed the course. Maybe, but man, that's a long time. I mean, I remember the fact, I have a good friend of mine, Ken Tobo, and I remember sitting down with him one time, and he was the Special Operations Command Central commander at the time. And we were chatting, kind of a buddy catch up sort of thing. It wasn't business. It was just talking and catching up. And the fact that his son was in the 82nd and was deploying to Afghanistan, and the weight that he felt in that sense of, we should have fixed this, even though Ken's a smart enough guy, he knew that we couldn't. But in that sense of, wow, this is now a second generation is going into the fight. And that's, that right there is an influential thing back to the the voting population of how they perceive it. Man, I mean, yeah, if it was, let's say, Bosnia, right? We still got soldiers in Bosnia doing whatever they're doing. I'm not 100% sure, honestly. But shoot, they've been there for 25 years. But you know what? Mm-hmm. Nobody's shooting at them there. And that's look how long we've had soldiers and airmen in Korea. Mm-hmm. 70 years. But it's much different environment than Afghanistan.
I think one of the keys to us not losing wars or not losing conflicts is that we don't get out of a country that we've had a conflict or war with. I mean, we're still in Japan, we're still in Germany. Trump wanted to pull all the U.S. troops out of Germany, but that's not going to happen. But we still have troops in Korea, and the thing is, we still have troops in Iraq, from what I understand, Al-Assad Air Base. Mm-hmm. Says I was there when they were expanding that runway. It was used by the Republican Guard, but that was a nice runway, and the strategic significance of it is one of the reasons why the U.S. is still there, and I think they'll remain there. In Afghanistan, though, we're going to be totally out, and I hate to say it, but if things go really, really bad, and these terror cells and these terror groups come back in like they were situated in 2001, we may have to do this all over again. Like Otis says, I mean, this could be like a 50-year thing. And it's like, I remember President Bush saying that this was going to be a long war. I forget the number of years that he said. But when he said that, people were amazed. They thought he was off his rocker. But I think he was right. This may be a long conflict. And this is just like phase one. I hope it isn't. But, they're setting everything up for it to be phase one to be continued, which is a real tragedy.
Yeah.
Just one more, and just again, kind of trying to paint the civilian perspective on things, because I think you guys will have a little bit more insight into these comparisons, because I keep seeing the comparisons to Vietnam. I keep seeing comparisons to Iran with the hostages there. Can you both relatively quickly kind of give a compare and contrast of those? Are any of those comparisons valid? What are some of the differences?
I'll say this: I was in college when South Vietnam fell, and so back then the news coverage wasn't all that great, and I had my studies to attend to, but I thought it was a very tragic event, but I wasn't that up on it. I just felt for the Vietnam vets, because these guys were really depressed about the whole thing, and I really couldn't understand it. So the similarity is, when Kabul fell. Earlier this week, I mean, I was really, really depressed. I mean, I think I was going through the same thing that the Vietnam vets went through back in 1975. So, I made it a point, and I've been making it a point this week. Whenever I see a guy wearing a Vietnam vet hat, I go up and I shake his hand, because I know exactly what that guy went through. And I think the situations are similar, but I think Afghanistan is much, much worse in regards to how we pulled out. Like I said, I don't know the exact details in regards to our drawdown in Vietnam, but I don't think it was the cluster that this thing has been.
No, it's not. Yeah, there are parallels to it. I think this one's, I don't know if I want to say an order of magnitude worse, but there is definitely, it is definitely in the chaotic sense of it. From my understanding, my readings and my studies of Vietnam, what's happening in Kabul right now is worse. And by the way, when the North Vietnamese came in and the Viet Cong came in, they still executed people. They did have bounties. The very similar thing to the Taliban. And I think what may make this worse is the fact that why didn't we learn a better lesson from that? Because, oh, by the way, wasn't it us that did that? It's that kind of thing. And I think that may even add into the fact of, hey, we've been here, we've done that. Why are we doing the same stupid thing again? And I think that whether or not there is truly a magnitude of difference, I couldn't give you that data, but I think just that fact of we've been there, done this before. Why are we making the exact same and possibly and highly likely worse mistakes that we did, whatever the math is, 45, 46 years ago in Vietnam when Saigon fell. So, that's where I'm at. And what was the other place you mentioned, Camden? I'm sorry.
Yeah, well, so I've seen the comparison to the hostage situation in Iran compared to, and I think that's more specifically Kabul compared to that, not necessarily the fall of Afghanistan. But do you think that's just a miss of people trying to tell stories that aren't there?
Yeah,
fair enough.
That's completely different in my book. I mean, that was an embassy, U.S. embassy that was overrun, and then Operation Eagle Claw was, and by the way, we learned some hard lessons there, and those were actually learned with Operation Eagle Claw, which was the failed attempt to rescue those hostages. So, Elton, I know this wasn't what we had talked about a week or so ago, but again, I appreciate your time and your thoughts. I'd like to just let you give us some closing thoughts on what's going on and what people can do to help.
Where can we send money?
Well, I understand that Glenn Beck has a foundation or some type of organization that he started up in regards to Christians. I tell you this, I was amazed when they mentioned that there's like 5,000 Christians in Afghanistan. I thought there were no Christians in Afghanistan, but if that's the situation, I would suggest Googling Glenn Beck's organization that he founded or he set up, and seeing what you could do to help the Christians, because they're next on the list. If the Taliban are serious in regards to what they intend to do to Afghanistan. I know when I was in Iraq, when I went in 2004, it was reported there were like a million Christians living in Baghdad, in the Baghdad area. That eventually got down to 200,000. They really started a purge on those guys. And if it's a similar situation in Afghanistan, it's going to be far worse. I mean, if there's 5,000, it's going to go down to zero.
Yep.
So I would definitely put them on the list in regards to people that you can help escape the persecution that's coming in Afghanistan, or the massacres, because I'm pretty sure there's going to be massacres in Afghanistan. I hate to say it, but I don't see any other way. So that's what I would suggest, and that's what I would encourage.
I appreciate that. And yeah, this has been a tough subject to talk about. I appreciate the thoughts in dealing with this. This has been very thought-provoking. I hope the listeners out there heed what we've said, because Elton and I both had our boots and our tennis shoes on the ground in a lot of locations, and it ain't just been there, got the t-shirt. we interacted with these people and know what's going on, and what's being portrayed, and whether or not that's the truth. You have to take that as a grain of salt. Elton, now I would like to give just a little bit a plug for your business, because I really appreciate your thoughts. This has been outstanding. I think our listeners are going to enjoy, but I would like to just know a little bit about your business and how people can interact with you on the business side.
Well, on the business side, it's I should say that we're in the financial services industry. We're a stock brokerage firm, a broker dealer, and basically our business is all institutional. We've been around for 27 years now. I started it back in 1994 when California became the first state to make disabled vet owned and operated company a special category, similar to minority and female owned. As a matter of fact, California only recognizes disabled vet owned and operated companies as a special category. There's legislation that I understand is working its way through Congress, whereby it says they're going to enable veterans to use their GI benefits to actually start up businesses. And I think that's very, very, that's an excellent idea. I would encourage people to, Google, this topic, find out, which congressional personnel are supporting it, and actually write letters or find some way to contact them and just tell them that you support this bill. Because veterans, as you know, that they're very entrepreneurial in spirit, and that's based upon our military background. I mean, in the military, they teach you discipline. They teach you aggressiveness. They teach you stick-to-itiveness, and that's very successful in business. As a matter of fact, I would attribute my business success to the fact that it's my military background. Basically, so the stuff that I learned in the military, I applied to business, and it's amazing how similar the two fields are. I mean, as a matter of fact, I call business a bloodless war, because basically that's what it is. You're basically doing a war to make your business a success and to realize your financial goals. So I would say definitely encourage Congress, if you establish any contacts with your congressperson or whatever, and you find out more about this bill, just encourage that they pass this bill, make it a law, so that veterans can not only use their GI benefits for educational purposes, but also to start and run their own businesses.
Yeah, wow, wow, that would be phenomenal. Because
it'd be great.
Yeah, that's a man, that'd be a watershed event with as many veterans as I know that are entrepreneurs, and how that sense is. Yeah, thanks for letting us know about that. That's amazing. Yeah. So one other thing, Elton, what's your the best way for people to, if they want to contact you, get in touch with you and learn more about your business and learn how they can help your team in Afghanistan?
Well, we have our website up, AmeriVet Securities. As a matter of fact, I came up with the name, trademarked it back in 1993. AmeriVet is short for American Veteran. But AmeriVet Securities, we got our website up and running, and my contact information is on there. If you can help any way in regards to the Afghan situation, because I'm going to be working that right after we get off the phone. Like I said, I got 23 guys I'm trying to get out of Afghanistan. So if there's any advice or any type of help you can render, feel free to contact me via our website. And you can check out what we're doing in regards to the business on our website. We've been very successful the last 3 years in the relaunch of the company, because of course it was offline for 12 years while I was doing my deployments. I did 7 deployments over 12 years. So it was far different from what President Bush, when he first called up the reservists, said, no more than 2 deployments over 2 years. Talk about mission creep. That's exactly what it turned out to be.
Awesome, man. No, thanks. And really appreciate you carving out the time. Our thoughts and prayers to your team and getting them home or getting them safe. I mean, that's what we'll focus on is getting them to a safe place. I really appreciate it.
Exactly.
Camden, run us out.
Thank you all for listening to today's show. Special thanks to our guest, Elton Johnson, and our sponsor, Tribe and Purpose. Find your tribe, find your purpose. You can check out recent episodes of The Cam and Otis Show on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you get your podcasts, and check out a full archive at thecamandotishow.buzzsprout.com. The Cam and Otis Show is on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Thanks again, and we'll see y'all next week.